I found something I wasn't supposed to. I genuinely think I stumbled across something I shouldn't have. Let me explain. I'm a 27-year-old medical student, nothing special or out of the ordinary about it. It was a stable path I was planning to be on since I was as young as I can remember. I always had other passions and interests though. One being that a buddy of mine, for the sake of this, his name is Jack, and I have always had an interest in exploring abandoned places, old factories, decrepit buildings, things like that. So much so that back in August we decided to start recording our outings as we planned to gather content to start our own YouTube page. We were ready to start our channel but decided to record one more trip before our first upload and a regular posting schedule because the circumstances around it seemed like something that would garner a lot of attention. I'm no computer whiz, but Jack went to school for cybersecurity, so he was going to handle the tech side of our page. One night, he and I were at his apartment, where he has a massive computer setup, to which I can only describe as movie-like. Jack was browsing a dark web forum. I'm not even sure it's called the dark web, but it's that shady part of the internet where you have to download a separate browser, which he does pretty regularly. Nothing malicious at all. He says it's actually a good place to learn about high-level computer stuff. Although on this night, he ended up on a forum for extreme urban explorers, people who travel all across the world doing the stuff we did, visiting abandoned places. In hindsight, it should have struck me as odd that this forum wasn't on the regular internet, given that it's pretty much sharing videos and locations that would otherwise be relatively easy to find. Or at least, that's what I thought. I was scrolling my phone when Jack turned away from his monitor and toward me. "Check your spam email," he said. I had a separate email account dedicated to junk and those enter your email for a free trial sites. I don't even remember telling him about my spam account, but he was a tech guy, so I didn't question it. Sure enough, my inbox had an email forward. It didn't have an original address, just a random string of letters and numbers. In the body of the email was a set of coordinates that was also a hyperlink. I clicked on it and it brought me to a Dropbox file that Jack had made private for he and I. On it was a .pdf. It was 3 pages. The first had the same coordinates typed out at the top, as well as a very grainy overhead satellite image of what looked like a rocky ocean cliffside. Under that was the same image, but in a thermal view. That image had a date and timestamp in the bottom corner. The month and day were redacted, but the year was this one, 2025. Additionally, the image had 6 red little dots, arranged in 2 small groups of 3. Each group aligned with a building jutting out of the cliff that I couldn't make out. I scrolled to the next page. These were a set of 4 screen captures, each one looking like a frame from a Call of Duty level, only these were not from any game. "What am I looking at?" I asked while analyzing the images. "I don't know, but it checks out." I looked through the metadata on the photos, and they are most certainly not edited or photoshopped. Jack replied. The rest of the .pdf file was similar images, except one stood out. The perspective was down the barrel of a sighted assault carbine, through a night vision filter. 3 guys dressed in tactical gear were lined up next to each other, beside an old, beaten-up wooden door fitted poorly into a cobblestone and brick structure. Metal bars covered scarce, dirty glass windows on the walls. There was an old padlock on the door that had clearly been broken off. The structure was surrounded by dying trees and sat perched on the cliffside, overlooking a vast darkness to which I could only assume was the ocean. Jack began to speak as I scrutinized every aspect of this document. Some account I've never seen post on this forum just uploads these photos about 3 weeks ago. Overnight, it blows up with wild theories from all the regulars in the comment section. The general consensus was that it was likely some film student playing a joke, Admittedly, I agreed, but I had been thinking about it on and off still for a few days. Then yesterday I get a private message from the original poster of the images. The coordinates I sent you, that was it. No other information, and when I tried to reply, it said that the account was deactivated, so I started digging some more. Those coordinates don't show up on any open source search engine. Same thing on the Tor browser. Believe it or not, the only thing I could find was in the school library, something about how a bunch of building permits were rushed for construction in a local town in the early days of World War I, not too far from there. Only there's no record of any sort of land parcel nearby. The coordinates are 25 miles off the coast of New Zealand, middle of the ocean. Clearly there's something there. I don't know what, but it could be a great idea to film us digging more into this and then travel to find whatever the place in that video is. I sat there still, partly trying to make sense of this odd scenario and using the logical part of my brain to try and explain the questions I still had, none of which were answered. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist or someone who considers themselves paranoid by any means, so I figured there was no harm in trying to go. Spring break had just begun anyway, and I had the money for it. I agreed to go. Good, because our flight leaves in a few hours, Jack said, as my phone beeped with an email notification, subject line, FWD. Your travel confirmation. I'm going to skip over the non-important travel details and fast forward a bit. After settling in at our hotel, we decided to go to the nearby fishing wharf to see if locals knew anything about the coastal geography. The wharf was old and otherwise could be defunct if it weren't for a few small fishing dinghies and some gruff-looking fishermen wandering the docks. We struck up a conversation with one of the fishermen, untying his boat from the pier. His name tag said Andy on it. We asked if he knew about anyone that looked out of place, coming around asking odd questions, any weird events or things of the sort. He seemed to shrug us off, saying that he sees the same people working the same shifts every day, as he has for the past 50 years. Jack pulled out a paper from his bag with the coordinates written down. He asked the fisherman if we could join him on his boat and we'd pay him to take us there. Andy glanced at the paper half-heartedly, but then, almost as if seeing a ghost, his gaze stayed on the numbers. I'll take you there, but you're in and out within the hour. No more than that, or I leave without you. Wait, you know what's out there? I interjected. Aye, an old lighthouse. That's it. If you know what's good for you, you'll turn back and go home. If you don't, meet here at midnight. Jack and I, both somewhat spooked but unwilling to admit it to the other, agreed and paid Andy half his fee up front. We went back to the hotel, packed our gear into a bag, and got a few hours rest before going back to the wharf. We started our recording as soon as we left the hotel. Both of us wore a harness with a small but powerful camera attached, connected to a large hard drive to make sure we could capture everything. We'd edit the footage later, or so we thought. The boat ride was quiet and cold. Nobody spoke, and even if we did, it most likely would have been unintelligible as the small boat's motor tore through the waves and choppy water. A small shadow appeared on the horizon, and its shapely darkness grew bigger and bigger as the boat got closer. Eventually, we pulled alongside of a severely unstable wooden dock, consisting of split boards barely held together by deformed and rusted nails. As soon as we got off the boat, the fisherman handed us a timer counting down from 1 hour. People say devices get weird over here. Andy didn't even stop the motor as he sailed off into the darkness. Both of us turned our flashlights on and began our way up the rickety metal stairs that wrapped up the cliffside. Atop the staircase was a metal landing that led to the backside of an old lighthouse. In the distance was an old forest of mostly dead trees. We cautiously walked around the perimeter, shining our flashlights at details of the lighthouse until we reached the front door. It was the same as the one in the photo, except now the broken padlock was in the dirt below and the door was slightly ajar. I walked over and grabbed the handle, only for it not to budge. I tried again, putting more force into it, and the door creaked loudly as it drug through the mud that built up at the bottom. I stepped inside and shined my flashlight up. A long, winding set of stairs wound upwards to a platform that had a huge, two-sided spotlight on it, encapsulated by panoramic glass windows, seemingly too dusty even for that light to penetrate. The stairs were broken apart in many places, so climbing up wasn't an option. We looked around inside, and there was nothing significant other than old tools and busted-up radio equipment. Jack and I walked back outside into the forest and began to follow a very overgrown path that led further inland. It stopped almost abruptly at what clearly used to be an old fence line. The chain link was in pretty bad shape and had many spots that were big enough to climb through. So we stepped in and walked another few yards before coming alongside a small cement building, almost resembling that of a war bunker. There was a sign on the wall that said "Keeper's Quarters." There was a huge metal door next to it, and when I lifted my flashlight to inspect the outside closer, the door was covered in writing. Small symbols and drawings littered not just the door, but a good part of building's facade. However, I felt a pit in my stomach when I made out what was written on the door: "Stay away from the light." It was written in what looked like white spray paint. I backed away, and in doing so, tripped over something on the ground. It was a gun, or what was left of one. It was broken in two pieces, its jagged metal edges seeming to suggest the weapon had been ripped through with ease. I recognized it as the same kind from the one in the photo. "Is that what I think it is?" Jack asked. "What's left of it?" I replied. The metal door had a big steel beam barricading it across, with a large wheel in the center. I grabbed one side and turned, the beam not budging at first, but then abruptly caving under the force. The wheel spun and the door swung open. Our flashlights illuminated a short hallway with doorways on either side, two on the left, one on the right. The two entrances on the left were wide open, their doors on the floor as if torn off the hinges. One room was a small washroom and the other was a joint kitchen/living area. "We're getting great footage," Jack said as we approached the closed door on the other side of the hallway. "I still don't get what's up with this place," I said, unsure of the seeming excitement that he displayed. I checked Andy's timer, 003200 it read. This door looked out of place. Upon further inspection, the door wasn't attached to the hinges and was being held firmly upright by something on the other side. Jack and I lowered our shoulders into the door and began to push against it. It slowly opened just enough that we could both squeeze into the room on the other side. The first thing I noticed was the smell. The door was being held up by stacked file cabinets, a bed frame, and a chair that were all pushed up like a barricade to prevent someone getting in. The room was larger than the others and pretty empty considering all the furniture was piled behind us. I pointed my flashlight across the room and that's when I saw it. The source of the smell, slumped over in a chair on a desk. It was a body. Jack and I both looked at each other. Me, being the med student, had the stronger stomach of the both of us, so I walked over. The man was dressed in a lab uniform. Dried blood surrounded the floor around him and stained the wood of the desk. In his hand was a pistol, but a more modern one, not like a World War I era sidearm that a bunker like this might have. It was sleeker, more like a tactical pistol the military or SWAT might carry. It looked out of place. There was an empty typewriter that the man's head fell to rest on. There was a hole in the back of the head as well. But perhaps the most disturbing part of this was that this wasn't an old corpse. A few weeks at most, month tops. Additionally, the bullet hole in the back of his head is an entry wound, not an exit wound that someone who shot themselves at their desk would have. Also, the bullet was precisely coded, right at the base of the brainstem and the spinal column. I didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. Call the police. And say what? We went and followed some shady clues that led us to something we don't fully understand, but the one thing we do know is that someone is clearly orchestrating some giant over-up. They'd laugh us out of the station. Plus, at this point, we might already be in too deep. Jack and I knew that now. We decided to look around one last time and grab anything that might be considered evidence of something weird going on. The room wasn't anything special, just a normal crew quarters a team of 1 to 3 people could live in while they maintained the island and lighthouse. I looked at the body one last time. This time I noticed something tucked under the desk, a small ammo crate. The man's hand was in rigor mortis and a finger was pointed right at it. How much more obvious of a clue do you need? Clearly he wanted someone to find that case after he met his end. I grabbed it and pulled it toward me. Jack crouched beside me and I flipped open the metal latch. It was lined with bullets stacked in rows, neatly organized. I stuck my hand in to push aside the ammunition, and my hand felt something underneath. I grabbed hold of it. It was a small package wrapped up in old paper and tied off. Wedged in between the rope and the package was a folded set of papers. I glanced back at the timer. 000700 shit. Jack and I didn't even bother opening it. I just tucked it away in my backpack and we quickly began making our way out of the building and back on our way toward where Andy dropped us off. We made it back to the boat in time and we were heading back to the mainland within a few minutes. Andy dropped us back at the wharf and I handed him the rest of the cash, plus a little extra. He nodded at us both and his parting words stuck with me. Hope you didn't find whatever it is you were looking for. And here we are, back to this post. We got back and opened the package. I'm not going to try and make sense of it right now, I don't want to. When we went to upload the footage from our cameras, all the files were corrupted. It was inaccessible. That, in addition to what we found when we eventually opened the package, led us to decide that was enough. We weren't going to even attempt our YouTube page anymore. I've uploaded the scans and other applicable contents and photos of the package into one large file. I don't know if I should continue this thread here and upload everything I can. Maybe I should. I'm going to sleep on it. If I decide to update, it'll be on this thread. Maybe this account will be gone in 24 hours. Stay tuned, I guess.